Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate Review Panel for Individuals and Creative Businesses. This is our fourth panel. We have 10 panels total for individuals and creative businesses, as well as other Thrive, Elevate nonprofit review panels. This one is specifically for individuals and creative businesses. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor here with the City of Austin Economic Development Department's Cultural Arts Division. We have Rebecca Sanchez with us today as our outside equity facilitator. She is ensuring that both city staff as well as our review panelists keep equity in mind as the applications are being reviewed. The review panelists have reviewed all applications prior to today and have tentatively scored them, provided comments on them. The panelists will be discussing the applications today and may or may not change their scores based on the feedback provided by their fellow panelists. We have asked the panelists to provide constructive criticism and feedback for future improvement. And we have also let them know that they are not scoring on consensus. So panelists may have different takes on an application, and that is fine. We brought them on board for the various areas of expertise that they bring to reviewing these applications. And so we've also asked the panelists not to repeat anything that has previously been stated. So if someone is silent or not saying anything, it's just because they're in agreement with what has been stated by other review panelists and don't have anything new to add. We will be recording this panel, and we will be timing with a maximum of 10 minutes for each application. If we have any kind of technical difficulties, we will pause the recording and pause the timer, so that way each application gets the full 10 minutes that it is allotted. I think that is everything I wanted to go over with all of you. We have asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible, that if they can find the information there, to keep that in mind when they're scoring. And we have also let the panelists know that they can use firsthand experience if they're familiar with you or your work, or if they've gone to your website or social media to find more information about you or anything mentioned in your application. But they are scoring based, only on that, any personal knowledge they have about you or your work, and anything that is in the application. That is what they are scoring on. So with that being said, we will get ready for our first review, which is Gaze with Clay and Awesome Art. Julia and Carly are our primary and secondary, and the 10-minute timer will start whenever Julia starts giving her commentary.
Okay, thanks, Jesus. Okay, so this applicant seeks $30,000 for intergenerational clay building workshops. What I really liked about this application was the focus on participation by their key constituencies and audiences in creating art themselves. And it was really great to see the breadth of involvement across the organizational leadership and their community partners. And there was also a really good description of accessibility accommodations in this application. It was really good to see all of the past activities and opportunity creation this organization has done historically, and it would have been really helpful to see these outcomes directly linked to key constituency groups. And same around the description of activities. It was a really thorough and comprehensive description, but it would have been great to see a little bit more about how equity would be centered in outcomes and activities. The description of participating identities and accessibility is thorough, as I've said, and it would have been great to see more about how intersectional identities were included in the creation and presentation of activities. But overall, I thought this was a comprehensive application. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Carly?
Yes, pulling up my notes. I really, I love the proposed activities, the accessibility component, offering like those intergenerational creative workshops. I definitely am familiar with a lot of the organizations that they collaborate with, and they definitely have a deep-rooted mission in uplifting marginalized voices. I think overall it was a strong proposal. I appreciated reading it. I think the only thing I noted is that I would like to see the plan to reach a new audience of key constituents that were deemed by the city. It doesn't necessarily explicitly state who that audience might be, so expanding upon that further. And I did think, particularly in how they're meeting the needs of their key constituents, that they did provide a reasonable amount of detail on how that activity, that work would be equitable. So yeah, overall I thought it was a great proposal and I liked reading it.
Thank you, Carly. Would any other panelists like to make any additional comments for this proposal at this time?
Yeah, I felt like the intersectionality was really clear to me, and there were moments within the application where they really went into detail how equity is centered within the application or within the proposed activities. So for me, that was fairly clear.
Thank you, Jimena. Anyone else? Any additional lingering thoughts from folks? Or even complementary critiques that maybe could elevate this a little bit higher?
Seeing as there are no additional comments, and again, we ask panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated previously, but if they do have thoughts that have not already been covered by other panelists, or if they have differing opinions, we invite them to state those. But if there are no other thoughts, additional comments, if you would, please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so by just manually raising your hand, not using the raise hand function on Zoom. Just raise your hand, I'll call on your name. Julia, Patty, Jimena, Carly, and Manny. All righty, thank you, everyone. All right, our next application up for review is Mercury McKnight. Manny and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And Manny, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. All right. Mercury McKnight seeks 30,000 30,000 grant, and for music, the constituencies, the KCs are explained in detail. That's what I liked about it. History is several years leading the community, and let's see. The leadership reflects the key constituencies, and they're seeking an album recording and release event. Intersectionality and inclusion blurs boundaries and empowers fellow trans voices, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+. What I see is that accessibility is not just an afterthought, it's a priority. I like that, the specialized hires for language accessibility, and the marketing plan meets all requirements. It reaches out to new audiences on multiple platforms, which I believe would have an impact. and the budget's well done. And the album recording visualizer release event is an immediate need, in my opinion. Funding because of risk of erasure, displacement, great budget and marketing plan, and well-detailed accessibility responses. There's not anything that I would have liked to see, because for me, it met all the requirements that it needed, and the letters of support spoke very highly of Mercury McKnight, to say.
Great. Any additional comments, Manny? You froze for just a second, but you're back.
No, yeah,
No?
that's it.
Okay, thank you. Secondary, Jimena?
Yes, I echo a lot of what Manny had said. The application is very mindful about the communities it wants to serve, and there is a lot of diversity between the artists, the representation within their lives, and it felt very inclusive, especially from the hearing impaired deaf community. I would have really loved to see a bit more detail on how folks that are non-English speakers would be accommodated throughout the events. There are some mentions of closed captionings, but throughout the event, and I think the launch party, there wasn't necessarily a mention of any type of interpretation for non-English speakers, like for other languages. Those are all my comments.
Thank you, Jimena. And at this point, we'd like to invite other panelists. If you have additional comments to provide to this application.
Seeing as there are no additional comments, no one has any different thoughts than what has already been stated. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Patty, Jimena, and Carly, and Manny. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is Fashion Fair X Swanky. Carly and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Carly, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes. So this applicant is requesting the full $30,000 for a 2-day fashion event. That will be entitled Fashion Fair Swanky, to happen in the fall of this year, as well as activities, networking. There's also a social component to further connect and elevate specifically queer community, Black, Brown, Indigenous creatives in Austin. And it also has the possibility of becoming a biannual fashion show and event. Additionally, it seems like this would be a continuation of this artist's work and their service to this community that they're very deeply rooted in. Overall, I thought this was a really strong application for a project that's definitely not only vying for the queer community, but specifically those Black, Brown, Indigenous folks within the queer community here in Austin. What else am I saying? But I also really saw particularly how not only do they represent the people that they're serving, but they are also incredibly actively creating those services based on a deeply lived experience, and really recognize those gaps in the services being provided for them and who they're serving. I found it really exciting and compelling. I also appreciate the sustainability and upcycling element in their work. And I think that can really be a great connector to the intersectionality element. And I think it could really have an amplifying effect for creatives in the community, especially in regards to an industry that might not always be as welcoming or make or hold space for them. And then what's the only other thing that I mentioned? Oh, they mentioned a collaboration with a collective of community and cultural leaders, the tribe of Aziza, that they share resources with in guiding the decision. And I just thought that further really like solidified their thoughtfulness in collaborating with other folks in what they mean to do. So yeah, overall, I felt it was really strong, and that's all of the comments I had.
Thank you. Secondary, Manny?
Yeah, I agree. I concur with my colleague on the application. And what I noticed was that the questions were answered in detail. I would have liked to have seen a deeper cultural leadership. I know that the applicant is in complete control and the leader of this. Another thing would be that the marketing plan, I would have liked to have seen a reach to new audiences in the KC. I see a lot of marketing towards folks that are already aware of the brand and the causes, but I would have liked to see an effort in the marketing plan to reach out to new audiences. And that's it.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I was just reading through. Yep, at this moment, if there's other panelists who have maybe some diverging opinions or additional commentary for this applicant and application, we welcome that now.
If there are no additional comments, any diverging opinions, thoughts that haven't been stated by other panelists already? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia? Jimena? Carly? Manny? And while the panelists are finalizing their scores, the timer has stopped for this application, so this is not cutting into the 10-minute review time. The 10-minute was to review it, then we give the panelists time to finalize their scores. Patty, was your score finalized for Fashion Fair? Okay, yes, sorry. So you kind of looking around. I wasn't sure if you were making notes or getting ready for the next one.
Looking at all my notes, my side, so many screens.
No, that's fine. Thank you. We will move on to our next application then, which is Future Traditions Fest. Jimena and Carly are our primary Future Traditions Fest. Yes, I pronounced that correctly. Jimena and Carly are our primary and secondary. And Jimena, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Futures Tradition Fest is a multidisciplinary arts festival that is dedicated to the Latinx artists working in experimental music, performance art, multimedia, and it provides a platform for artists to create, present, and collaborate on the new works, and hopefully including the Latinx community as a key constituents, but also expanding it to include Afro, Latinx, and LGBTQ artists as well. They're offering bilingual programming and adding a lot of accessibility service to ensure broad participation. I would have liked to see a more detail regarding the intersectionality within the planning and like the intersectional identities that are going to be part of this, of building this festival, and a bit of a more detailed plan for folks with disabilities. And sorry, I forgot to mention that they're looking for the full funding of $30,000.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Carly?
I echo most of what was already said. Additionally, I found the proposed activities very compelling, and I really appreciated the platform they're providing for Latinx artists, and specifically that it is for and by the community they're serving. It also seemed like they had a really deep-rooted history in the community and history of service from both a local, translocal sense and global sense, which I appreciated as well. And I like that they had these really thoughtful and impactful elements in the activities and collaborations they would be having. I noted the workshop element, and they're also utilizing spaces like Data Lab and Ground Floor Theater, which I thought was really great and really connected with who they were trying to reach. Yeah, I think the only things I would have liked to have seen is maybe some expanded detail on reaching new to audiences in their marketing plan. And yeah, otherwise I thought that it was a really strong proposal.
Thank you, Carly and Jimena. Any other panelists? We invite you at this moment. If you have additional comments, anything different, thoughts that haven't been stated. What?
Yes, I do. Just have one small comment. I agree with what the other panelists have commented on. The only other thing that I would add is just that it would have been really great to see how the activities and how the key constituency groups in Austin would be prioritized, and how Austin artist participants would be prioritized in these activities. That's my only comment.
Okay. Anyone else?
If there are no further comments, either differing opinions or a thought or note that you have that hasn't been stated already by another panelist. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jimena, Julia, Patty, Carly, and Manny. Alrighty, thank you everyone. Next application up for review is Hybrid Nation. Patty and Jimena are our primary and secondary, and Patty, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right. Hybrid Nation is seeking the Elevate grant. Just to start off, this grant I felt was very, or this application was very vague as to what background on the company and for what the event was that they wanted to mount. So I would have liked to have seen a lot more about the company. I had to dig a little to try to figure out who they were, but they say they are a community-driven company that likes to give back to Austin locals and to help shine a light on local talented artists, models, producers, etc. I scored this one a bit low because I had a lot of trouble finding information in terms of what the goals of this city's grant is in terms of equity, and centering key constituencies. So in general, I think this applicant would have really been helped by going to possibly one of the economic developments workshops and finding out more about what the application is specifically looking for. And I think that's what I have to say about this one.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, what the primary was mentioning there is we do have optional, not mandatory application workshops and other resources for applicants when they're submitting their application. So with that being said, we'll move on to the secondary, which is Jimena.
Thank you. I appreciated how this application's detail or shared that their slogan is diversity in entertainment, and they mentioned looking to throw an event that is public for or free for the public, and it would ideally include artists, musicians, vendors for all ages. I agree with details that Patty shared, that there was a lack of detail on the execution, on how the proposed activity is going to serve the key constituents, or even naming of the key constituents. So I think there's a big opportunity to go into more details as well within the language accessibility, the disability accessibility, marketing, and the budget.
Thank you, Jimena. Any additional comments from other panelists about this application?
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo and add what others already said. When you were looking at the letter of support that day from the mayor, I think that was kind of this part where it definitely does show that they have this history of service and providing these meaningful events. And I hope that additionally that they utilize some of those services for creating an even stronger proposal, because it does seem like they could really make a substantial impact on their collaboration and creativity with artists in the city.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
If there are no further comments from the panel, again, we are asking panelists not to repeat and said, and they may not state anything if that is the case and are in agreement with what the other panelists have been said. But if anyone has differing opinions or a thought that hasn't been stated already, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Manny, Patty, Jimena, and Carly. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Joe J. Ibarra and Shania Montufar. Julia and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. So this applicant is seeking $30,000 to curate an immersive exhibition featuring works from 3 emerging Black and Brown artists. This application clearly explained their project and key constituency groups, and I appreciated the focus on past, present, and future. There were very clear descriptions about their personal history of leadership, and extensive experience was very easy to see. It would have been great to see a little bit more detail about lived experience and not just the work that they have done in the past. I know it's not a huge difference in that, but just the lived experience would have, it's clear that it's there, but the description of it would have been really helpful to see in the application. The activities were well described and thought out. And think it would have been really great to see a little bit more about the description of the kinds of work that would be exhibited from the contributing artists. But otherwise the activities were well described. I think it would have been great to see if, some options for hearing impaired people to be included. And on the marketing side, the applicant definitely detailed some solid strategies, but it's not completely clear how new audiences would be reached in these marketing efforts. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Patty?
Yeah, I agreed. I thought this was a very strong application, and it felt to me that this very much fits within the goals of the city's funding for this grant. So I thought it was a very strong proposal, and I don't have much to add beyond what Julia said.
Thank you, Patty and Julia. Anyone else? Any additional panelists would like to provide commentary, feedback for this applicant? Not seeing any less words. Okay.
Thank you. I did want to also mention that within the accessibility, there were some really mindful implementation of audio description, make visual art accessible to people with visual impairments. And there are, I just really wanted to note that their proposed activity does include a lot of mindfulness or around different disabilities, but yeah, that's all I want to add.
Thanks, Amanda, for pointing that out. Actually, I missed that in the application. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. That's why we have these review panels, is you are looking at about 25 or so applications. And so that's why we, like hearing what the primary and secondary have to say. Sometimes it'll jog our memories. It's like, oh yes, this was in there. And staff has not done a deep review of these, but has done a cursory review. And I am following along as panelists mention things just to, make sure, okay, is that mentioned in the application, or is it, it is there, but maybe it's unclear. So thank you for that, panelists. Other comments, diverging opinions, thoughts that you have that haven't been stated by other panelists yet? Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia? Jimena? Carly, Patty, and Manny. All right. And we are slightly ahead of schedule and scheduled for a break. So let's go ahead and stop the recording. And we are back from break. Our next application up for review is Hands That Steal from Other Mouths. Julia and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Okay, so this applicant is seeking $30,000 for a video game performance and community teach-in that educates attendees about the connecting exploitation between Black America and imperialized Africa. I thought that this was a really unique proposal and presented an interesting approach. And I appreciated that the audiences are invited to participate in the design making and related to the creative practice of the game development. I thought that was really interesting and key part of the proposal. And I think it would have been great to see some more around language accessibility. I don't think it was addressed at all in the application, although there was some mention of accessibility accommodations. there's some really great marketing strategies that are described, but it's very specific, and my concern is that it's just not broad enough to really get the audiences involved in this proposal and this activity. And then the budget did not include expenses for specialized accessibility or language access services. But overall, I thought that the proposal was solid and presented a really interesting approach to these problems. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Patty?
I echo a lot of what Julia said. I thought it was a very unique, being a game, and then the public aspect of it being playing the game and having a show of it, bringing the audience in. I thought that was interesting, and it's also interesting how it has grown over time, and it seems like a project that will continue to grow while speaking specifically to their key constituencies and working with the key constituencies to test the game and further bring that out. So in all, I thought it was a very interesting project.
And at this time, we invite other panelists to contribute any additional commentary for this proposal. Anything that you haven't heard or might be helpful to this applicant?
Yes, I really appreciated the way that this application was really centered specifically to the Black, African American, and Black and African diaspora. I was curious regarding the playtest aspect of the creation of the project. It sounded like part of their decision making is between the individual that creates the game, but also it is split as well with the folks that will be play testing this game. And I was hoping to have more detail regarding who will be specifically the folks that will be play testing, and if their identities or lived experience or intersectionality with the purpose of the game are aligned. So that's one detail I would really want to know, as well as how will these the feedback through the play test be incorporated into the game, and if they will be compensated for the play testing. Those are all my comments.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sorry, I just wanted to make an edit. Within the production fees, there is a comment that play testers will be compensated.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I was partially quiet here as I'm kind of looking through the application to see if there was anything like that in there. And also giving panelists time if they had other comments that they would like to add in. I'll also say, I think the comments still stand about, more specificity, but in the who holds decision-making power question, they do say, during these paid play tests, my key constituencies, and then in parentheses, Africans from the continent and belonging to the Black diaspora, will be given the opportunity to give their opinions on the project's game mechanics, narrative, music, and teach-in lesson plan via interviews I will be conducting for feedback. Again, maybe some more specificity would help the panelists with that, but they do mention that in the response to that question. So just wanted to point that out.
Yes, thank you so much, Jesus. I missed that part.
Other questions, or not questions, comments on this application? Anything that hasn't been stated by another panelist previously? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Patty, Julia, Jimena, Manny, and Carly. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Black Tie Enterprises, Manny and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And Manny, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right. Hi, everyone. Here's the primary for Black Tie Enterprises. They're seeking 30K grant, and what they're doing is a 9-part series, the 9 Chronicles, and 9 Chronicles, 9-part series and workshops. And I like that the artists are leaders and that they're elevating these diverse voices, so it's creating equity. They've defined their artistic goal to celebrate beauty, and the KCs are defined. KCs are part of the leadership. The activities are clearly defined, and also the budget and the marketing plan are solid. What I would like to see is specialized hires for disability access and specialized hires for language accessibility. I noticed that in the accessibility for number 6, there are provided large print materials. There's accommodations met of amplified sound and audio assistance, but what I would have liked to see was a specialized hire. And for language accessibility, there is an intent to hire a multilingual staff members to assist people that have limited English proficiency. However, and pamphlets too in common language spoken, but I would have liked to see a special hire to be contracted for this event. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Secondary, which is Jimena.
Thank you. Yeah, the organizer and the planner have really strong ties to the constituents they're serving. They're grounded in providing opportunities for self-care, self-discovery, acceptance. They're very mindful of how to provide how they're going to gather opportunities or to provide opportunities for the Black and LGBTQ communities. I agree with Manny's comments regarding hiring someone specific for accessibility and language accessibility. I also wish there would have been more detail in the marketing plan that include a targeted plan for reaching tourist or audience members or community members with disabilities.
And just a question for clarification on my end when you mentioned, so reaching tourists with disabilities, was that what the comment was about?
It was tourists and members in the community with disabilities.
Okay, great. I will say that if the applicant does score high enough to receive funding, all applicants are required to post their events to Visit Austin, which is a website through the Austin Convention and Visitors Bureau that does specifically reach out to tourists. So keep that in mind as you're scoring, but with that being said, seeing more specificity in the marketing budget, more details, or in the marketing plan is also a valid comment. So just want you to keep both of those things in mind as you are scoring the application. With that being said, open it up to additional comments or differing opinions from other panelists. And again, we have asked panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists. So if they are quiet, they're in agreement with what has been stated by the other panelists, but do invite them if they do have thoughts that have not been covered by other panelists or if they have diverging thoughts. Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jimena, Patty, Julia, Manny, and Carly. Ready? Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Callan Y. McGuire. Kaylin. Carly and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Carly, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes. So this proposal is requesting the full amount to present a production exhibition series entitled Lessons by a Special Type of Seed Oil and Light. Excuse me. It seems like they plan on showcasing 15 original canvas artworks. There's a video and journal entry component. Specifically, I think the journal entries speak to this griot component that they mention in their work and the proposed activities. And they definitely strongly demonstrate that they're wanting to address that lack of representation opportunities for Black and Brown artists. I thought that overall it was a strong application. I appreciated the wellness and focus on the wellness focus and the focus on creating more sustainable career development opportunities. I also found that they had a deep-rooted history of service, and I thought that the attached work samples were very compelling. Although their response to cultural leadership was very detailed, I found that I had to then find those additional details in the work samples and the letters of support, which then strongly demonstrated that representation through lived experience, but I would have liked to see that in that section as well, a little bit more in the front end of the application. Additionally, I would have liked to have seen more of how the audience and community is involved in the event. It wasn't entirely clear to me, like once I started getting further into the details of the project, couldn't get the idea of what the events would be like in terms of what other artists might be included or involved in the proposal. If this is just to support one artist being the applicant, or kind of how, or like the development of their work, so to speak. There definitely was like a public component where the community can engage, be supported, uplifted, but I just would have liked to see perhaps more of that collaborative approach to the community outreach. And would love to hear from my colleagues if perhaps maybe I missed that mark a little bit. Additionally, with intersectionality, I'd also like to hear from some of my other colleagues here. I thought that they had this really great concept of rethinking ourselves as conduits and historians, regardless of background, specifically educational background. I think the big things that kind of lowered the score were, unfortunately, there was no planned language access. And I think perhaps they could consider those points where audiences might seek those details, whether that's their marketing materials or different signage for the events, etc. I think additionally, what was the other thing? They did have a component where it was like an audio component with all the pieces of work. And I was curious perhaps how that could lend to that language access piece. And the other thing is, although the marketing platform was really detailed, I think that could have been further explored, and they really didn't explicitly describe how they'd reach those new audiences or audience members with disabilities or whose primary language is not English. Overall, I thought that it was compelling and would really have a deep benefit to the community. Just some additional things that I think could kind of drill deeper down in the proposal.
Thank you. And before we move on to the secondary, I will note that at a quick glance, it appears that the responses to both accessibility and language accessibility are the same. So just in response to that comment, I will state that looking specifically at the language accessibility, they do talk about contract sign language interpreter. And so sign language, American Sign Language, or any sign language is considered a non-English language. So keep that in mind when you're scoring. We consider sign language to be meeting the language accessibility portion. With that being said, staff has only glanced at this briefly, so keep the totality of the application in mind as you are scoring. And then secondary, Manny.
All right. I agree with everything that primary has just stated through every section. I agree. And what I'd like to add to it is that the letters of recommendation were one of the best that I've seen in my experience here. And that's it.
Great, thank you. And good feedback on the letter of support. I will remind both the panel and the applicant, we are not comparing one application against another when we are scoring. It's just how the application meets the review criteria. Comments from other panelists, if you have a different take or thoughts that haven't been stated by the primary and secondary already.
I had some question in their budget in how it was reflective of not just the project itself, but what they state they focus on, in that it didn't seem like it seemed, let me see, what was my note specifically? I think they seemed very worthy of the funding, but it seemed like where they were putting funding kind of went against, they said, the quote unquote, they want to transition from survival mode to establishing sustainable careers for artists, but the majority of the funding in the budget is not going towards payments to artists, but rather marketing and subscriptions and some other things that seemed a little more background. So it just felt to me like that focus was not shown in the budget and the way they were using the funds.
Thank you. I will state for what it's worth that the only requirement when the applicants are filling out the budget is to show how they will meet the city or the award amount that they're requesting. We do encourage them at optional application workshops if they do have extra funding, or if they want to give a more holistic view of the project, to add that in into column C of the budget, but they're not required to do so. The minimum is that they show how they are spending the city funding. But with that being said, one of our priorities is seeing a payment to artists and administrators. There is some payment to administrators I see in the budget as well. We have just over 2 minutes left for this application. Any additional comments, differing opinions, thoughts that have not been stated by others already? Seeing as there are no additional comments. And again, we're asking panelists not to repeat anything that has already been stated, but to provide any new comments, or they can reiterate what has been stated, but asking them not to, but definitely if they have something that has not been stated by another panelist to add that in. Seeing as there are no additional comments, panelists, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jimena, Patty, Julia, Manny, and Carly. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Unveiled, a musical by Glenna Bowman, Matthew Sheed, and Ellie Shaddles, presented by Sound Beacon Entertainment, LLC. Patty has a conflict with this application, so we'll have her camera turned off and mic muted while this application is being discussed. We will invite her back after the other panelists have finalized their scores on this application. Our primary and secondary are Jimena and Carly. And Jimena, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Unveiled. The musical, it is an original musical that has a powerful story of courage, and it's set in ancient Persia. It's planning to feature a diverse local cast and crew from the following key constituencies: LGBTQIA community, Hispanic and Latino community, Black and African American community, Asian community, and the Middle Eastern community. And these are going to be members of the cast and crew. The bigger, broader impact is helping Austin become a leader in producing new works of theater. And there is great detail on how they're hoping for the audience members to be as well included in the key constituents to be as well included in their show. So making sure that both the cast is represented of these communities and as well as the audiences. They are applying for the full amount of $30,000. And there is a space, or I would have liked to know more detail regarding on how the constituents' experiences are reflected in the story that's being told within the theater production. I was intrigued to see if there was feedback from these communities going into the play itself, or how their lived experiences will be presented throughout the show. And I would have also liked to know how if some language accessibility details. Let me go into my actual notes for language accessibility. It didn't list any specific language accommodations, and let me double check. Or it did include Spanish translation within the marketing materials, and there will be one performance for Spanish speaking audience members. I would have loved to see if there is going to be a trained professional or who will be involved in creating or in either dubbing, or if it'll be an all Spanish speaking cast. I would have just loved some more detail about that. And there is detail as well that there's going to be sign language interpreter within one of the performances. Again, would have loved to see who would be or what kind of experience that person would have. But those are all my comments at the moment.
Thank you. Secondary, Carly?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything my primary said. The additional comment being, and perhaps this is represented, although they mentioned the involvement of their key constitutes throughout the proposal, I didn't feel like it was as strongly reflected in their work samples as it could be. So I think that was the only thing that was kind of something I wanted to note. Otherwise, I thought it was a strong proposal.
Thank you, Carly and Jimena. Additional comments from other panelists? Manny, you came off of mute. I don't know if you want to speak. Okay.
I will note in the budget, and I don't think this detracts from the comment about more specificity on the sign language interpreter, but in the budget for accessibility services, they do have $750. It says sign language interpreter services for one designated performance. Another $200 from donations and ticket sales will be used for Spanish translation services. Again, it doesn't provide the detail that was mentioned in the comment that the panelists would have liked to have seen, but just so you all are aware that it is listed in the budget as a line item. Other comments, differing opinions, commentary you have that hasn't been stated by one of the panelists already? And again, we ask our panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists if they are in agreement with what has been said, but if they do have differing thoughts or even are in general agreement with what has been said, but have a different note or comment to provide that. But seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Jimena? Manny, Julia, Carly. Alrighty, and Patty may come back as we are concluded reviewing this application. And our next application up for review is Liz Santamaria, artist. Patty and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And I think that's pronounced Liz. I'm sorry, Liz Santamaria, artist. Patty and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And Patty, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. Lisa, you said Lise? Pronunciation? Okay. Lise Santa Maria is seeking this funding for a project titled Nuestras Manos, Our Hands, an exploration of Latino bicultural experience. And it's a project involving 9 months of research and art making, culminating in an immersive art exhibition focused on the theme of hands. I really felt this was an incredibly strong proposal. It was very, just the writing and the way the proposal was put out was very clear. I found everything that I needed to see. I noted that they seem to have a very strong history of service in just a short amount of time. They have lived experience within their key constituency, and the key constituency is very much involved in the project. So I liked that a lot. I also liked, let's see, what else did I say that was very strong in this? They had a very clear and thought out plan for accessibility, I thought, that includes professionals, and they specifically mentioned a willingness to learn and adapt that accessibility. So I appreciate that. Just hearing that I thought was a great thing to mention. And I thought this was really, I also love that they, in their budget, include honorariums to the community members that will be involved in the project as well. And I thought it sounded like a very good project for the city's funding focus. And that's all I have to say about that.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Jimena.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if Patty mentioned this, but Lynn is looking for the full $30,000 for funding. And I agree, there's a really strong tie to the constituents that they're featuring in their public activity and their engagement. There's a strong focus on intersectionality, accessibility, equity. The description of the accessibility plan is so thought out and so willing to be expanded. So it really opened my eyes of how strong of this how this application is very thoughtful, as well as within the language accessibility. I would have loved to see more detail on how the marketing plan is going to expand its efforts to reach new audiences that are not currently within the artist's constituents. For example, the Asian American or Asian community, Middle Eastern communities that are within the city of Austin's key priority key constituents. So just expanding to reach other members outside of their own key constituents, but they do have a mention of going into spaces for like the Texas School of the Deaf, Art Spark, and sharing it on very public sites like Do 1512, Visit Austin. So they still have a pretty broad reach.
Thank you. Any additional commentary from other panelists? From our end, it looks like pretty good. You all kind of agree on this proposal.
I will state as a point of clarification, more for the applicant really than anything else, but also for the fellow panelists. The applicant does list their key constituencies as Latino, and then in the marketing question, the comment that was made about reaching new audiences within the key constituencies, they do have an area related to that. Oh, I lost it, but basically it was to Latinos as well. So it was not clear, I think is what the comment was, is how are you reaching out to new key constituencies that are not already your own key constituents. So just a point of clarification on that. Other comments from the panel? If there are no further comments, anything that has not already been stated, as Rebecca said, we're all pretty close on this application, but if there are any additional comments you would like to add. Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Manny, Julia, Patty, Jimena, and Carly. Thank you, everyone. And then our next application up for review is LZM Studio LLC. Julia and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thanks, Jesus. Okay,
Mhm.
this seeks $30,000 to produce drawing workshops focused on enrichment and therapeutic healing. The proposal identified many deserving groups and constituencies, but I felt that they could have been more descriptive about how their work will focus on groups that are at immediate risk of erasure or displacement in Austin specifically. The applicant detailed a very impressive background, and again, I think just a little more connection to these key groups would have been really nice to see. Additionally, I think the applicant has very strong experience and has received clearly a lot of training, but I would have liked to see how this experience and training relates to their work in supporting these key groups. And one thing that I really did appreciate about this application is that it really considered embodied experience, and appears to have a really strong interest in really solid experience in this area, which was really great to see. And I really liked how that came through in the proposal. And the proposal detailed some and named some intersectional identities and explained some considerations, but it was a little difficult to see how these community voices were to be involved in the process of determining activities and making decisions in that way. On the marketing side, the applicant detailed some really great ideas. I think the only thing that didn't come through so strongly for me was efforts to reach new audience members within the priority constituencies. And I felt that the budget was quite vague and didn't really provide a lot of information around where costs would be allocated, in particular around production costs, payments to artists, accessibility services. Those things were not covered in the budget, so I felt like just a little more detail in there would have been really helpful. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Patty?
I honestly, I echo all of the comments Julia had. I felt that this, it was not detailed enough, so it was very broad. It felt like I couldn't parse out specifically the key constituencies necessarily, because it just broadly spoke of audiences in that way. So yeah, I completely agree with what Julia said.
Thank you both. Any additional comments from our other panelists?
I will note in the budget, it does add up to the $30,000 request amount. So it does meet that part, but the comment still stands about with the other line items. Their applicants are not necessarily required to put stuff in every line item, but I think the comment still stands about seeing other things so that the budget is reflective of the application as a whole. May have helped the panelists with those comments be able to score more strongly. And I will reiterate that panelists are not required to repeat anything that has previously been stated by other panelists. But if you do have a differing opinion, if you have a thought, even if you have a concurring opinion, but have a comment that has not been stated by other panelists, invite you to state that as well. If there are no further comments from the panel, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Patty, Julia, Manny, Jimena, and Carly. All righty, thank you, everyone. And we will break for lunch and we'll stop the recording. And welcome back from lunch, everyone. We are continuing our Elevate review panel for individuals and creative businesses. This is day 4, so we've done 3 other panels. We'll have 6 more after this. We are doing 10 panels for individuals and creative businesses. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor. We also have Rebecca Sanchez as our outside equity facilitator. She is here to make sure that both city staff as well as the review panelists are keeping equity in mind as we review these applications. The review panelists have reviewed and scored tentatively all of the applications prior to today. They have comments on them. They will be talking through them today. They may change their scores, but are not required to do so, depending on the feedback they hear from their fellow panelists. We have asked the panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists, and they are not scoring on consensus, so it's okay if panelists have different takes. If they do have a different take, or even if they're in agreement with what has been said, but there's a note that they have that has not been stated by another panelist, we do ask them to state that. But if they are quiet, it's because they are in agreement with what has been stated by other panelists already. We will have a 10-minute maximum time to review each application. I will be timing it. I'm getting my timer ready now. If we have any kind of technical difficulties, someone's internet goes out, they lose connection to Zoom, we will pause the timer so that way that application gets the full 10 minutes allotted to each application. We ask that the panelists look beyond grantsmanship to the extent that they can and score the application based on the information either that is provided in the application or if they are familiar with you or your work, either through firsthand, personal knowledge of seeing some of your events or through the research they've done on your website or other social media, but they are scoring based on what is in the application here. I think that is it. So we will get started continuing our review. So the next application up for review is Sage Suede. Julia and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. So this applicant is seeking $30,000 of funding. The applicant has clearly described some relevant and great experience in the areas involving key groups, which is what's very interesting and inspiring to read about. However, the application did not provide enough detail upon which to really make full decisions or to really evaluate what the project actually is. The project description was quite vague and it was hard to identify how key groups would be involved. It would have been really helpful to better be able to fully understand how the applicant plans to engage the communities they did identify, and to go into more detail about how these groups are central to their artistic mission. The applicant has clearly been involved in these key groups in various ways, which is important, and it appears that the work has evolved over time, rather than having a founding history of explicitly serving the identified communities. And so it would have been really great to see more about how the applicant's work has improved access to opportunities for the key groups that were identified. But again, just more information just would have been helpful there to really fully understand what they're trying to do. The applicant provided some brief information about past, but I felt did not really demonstrate a deeply rooted understanding of the key constituency groups in the answer to this, the question around cultural leadership. I didn't feel that the proposed event was described in a way that we could really, or that I could really identify how they're bringing equity considerations into this proposal, or how key groups would be invited to the event or would be contributing to this work. There was no consideration apparent of accessibility beyond ADA access. And while it was great that the applicant speaks multiple languages, and that's certainly helpful, it would have been great to also see how the proposed activities provided specialized adaptations for non-English speakers, and perhaps involve the services of trained professionals or other adaptations. And I felt that the marketing plan, while the applicant has some really great social media channels that they can use, and that is definitely going to be helpful, it would be good to see also how new audiences would be engaged, and how how the potential audiences with disabilities and non-English speakers would be targeted. The budget was very high level and did not really detail how payments to artists would be split, or when I didn't feel that it really reflected the application. It was hard to see how the budget linked to what this proposal wanted to do. So overall, I felt that it was quite difficult to score this application. There just was not a lot of information provided, and then just a little bit more thorough consideration around the questions would have been really helpful for this application. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Manny?
Yes, I would like to agree and concur with primary. And I'd also like to add that the marketing plan, I would have liked to have seen more than one platform. I see internet, social media, but I'd like to see another platform being used, print, TV, radio, or another platform. And then for the budget, I wanted to add that I noticed the payment to artists and marketing expenses are listed, and it seems that production fees are part of the venue rental, because applicant says a microphone will be the only need for production costs, which assumes the venue is responsible for the PA system and equipment in the rental expenses. So it just needs more detail on the budget. That's it.
Thank you. And at this time, if there are any other panelists that would like to provide more information, additional commentary on this application, we invite you to do so.
Again, we ask that panelists not repeat anything that has been stated, but if there are either differing opinions or comments that they have, thoughts that they have that have not been stated by the other panelists. But if there are no additional comments from the panel, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Jimena, Patty, Julia, Carly. And Manny, were you done with your score on this one, or did you need more time? Okay, okay, great. Saw you moving your papers around, so just wanted to be sure. All right, so that concludes that application. Thank you, everyone. We are moving on to Teatro Espacio Austin. Manny and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Manny, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, Teatro Espacio Austin is the theater group, and their key constituencies are Hispanics in the theater community, performing arts, reaching out to youth and adults, and preserving Hispanic culture at risk of displacement, with a history of serving since 2008 in the community. Their leadership is the KC Bilingual Hispanics, and their activities are giving access to art and creating community engagement, inclusion, programming, and education. They intersect. They had a great response, very detailed. I liked about the intersections of gender, race, socioeconomic, age, and disabilities, including that with access to hired specialized services. Applicant is hiring specialized services for language access, and the marketing plan hits multiple platforms and is detailed. The budget does not equal the 30,000. I would like it to be transparent on where all the money is going if seeking 30,000 or a partial grant. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to our secondary, I will note that for the budget, 30,000 is the maximum request amount, but they can request less than that if they'd like. So just keep that in mind as you are scoring. With that being said, secondary, Patty?
Yeah, I think there was actually something wrong with the budget form itself, because the total was not actually what the total of the numbers were, I discovered. So I'm not sure what that was. That seemed to be just an issue. No points off for that. It's not their problem. But I did think there was a little disconnect with the budget versus what they say they want to do, which I really loved in our barrio, bringing theater to the people in their neighborhoods, etc. And then in the budget, they include a very large amount for renting a space specifically that's not in that kind of neighborhoods or going out, because the project was several different venues, several different spaces, which I love that idea. And then the budget didn't quite match the actual project. That's the only thing I noticed there. Otherwise, I think it's a great project and very much part of the community and working with the community and bringing theater to the people as opposed to making them come to you, kind of, in a sense. So I really appreciated that and thought that was a good use of the city's time.
Thank you. And in response to what Patty had said, staff has only done cursory glances of these applications. So looking at the budget, I do see what Patty was referring to there, that it does add up more than the 11,300 or whatever that was listed there. I'll also note that for the venue fee, and again, staff has not reviewed these in detail, but they do say that in parentheses, if we can't perform in public spaces. So just keep that in mind as you're scoring the application. With that being said, we'll open it up to comments from other panelists.
Yes, I really love the detail that this application gave. It feels like a very mindful and collaborative use of especially having their key constituents engaged. I would have loved to see more description between their board of directors of who has that lived experience of their key constituents. They mentioned that it is a diverse and representative of key constituents. It includes individuals from different cultural backgrounds, professions, and community groups. Again, I just would have loved to see the details in that.
Thank you. Comments from other panelists? Any notes you have that have not been stated by other review panelists? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Manny, Julia, Jimena, Patty, and Carly. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to our next application. Our next application up for review is Arte Art. Carly and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Carly, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes. So this was a challenging application to score for me. I feel like this artist's life work and the proposed project itself is truly very beautiful, and I deeply appreciate the want and need to provide this type of land art. And I think it could have
And I have paused our timer, so that way this application does get the full 10 minutes. Carly, you're freezing up for us. We do ask that panelists keep their cameras on, but if there's a bandwidth issue, Carly, you may want to try turning your camera off, and we'll see if we can still hear you while you're giving your comments. And again, the timer is paused while we're waiting. We will see if maybe Carly just needs to reconnect or if she'll come back. So we will move on to the secondary to give feedback. So Manny, whenever you're ready to begin, we'll resume with the timer for this application.
All right, I'm ready. We have already art and multidisciplinary with for the key, the section 1 for KCs, the proposal is rooted in serving underfunded outdoor arts and the history. I like that the applicant demonstrated leadership skills and that the leader is an artist. The activities serve the outdoor arts community, and oh, there we go. And community voices. You want me to switch off to primary?
No, you can go ahead and continue. Carly, we'll have you make your comments when Manny's done with his.
Okay. And I also like that some extended languages are provided in the accessibility. All the requirements are met in the marketing response. And I found the budget is detailed and includes all the requirements. And I believe the project has the potential for attracting the KCs and the tourists to Austin and elevating marginalized outdoor artists. The things that I would have liked to have seen is that there's no immediate risk of cultural or racial or erasure or displacement that I found. And I would have liked to have also seen the it's an issue of it being outdoor that the applicant explained that the access is limited. I would have liked to have seen something about that to provide this outdoor experience for everyone, because it seems like it could have an impact for those that not necessarily could make this, but would like to be outdoors for this event. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Carly?
yes, sorry about that. I'm not sure what was actually heard with what I said before. It unfortunately disconnected me. Would you mind telling me? I guess I can just go on what the secondary reviewer said. But
yeah, and I've paused the timer again just so we can kind of, get back up to speed. We did hear a few of your comments, but if you want to start from the top or just, have state any comments that you have that have not already been stated by Manny, and I'll wait, 5 or 10 seconds before I start the timer back up.
oh, are you saying to mention it now before you start the timer back up?
Yeah, go ahead and start talking, and then I'll start the timer in about 5 or 10
Okay.
seconds.
I think I was mentioning possible connection to the land back movement, the work they were doing, and that it could have, a pronounced impact on community in the sense of like climate issues. And then I enjoyed the aspect of inclusivity with people with different disabilities, engaging in these really tactile activities. And overall, I think that this could be a really impactful project collaboratively and creatively as an artist. And I think it'd be really beneficial to the city and to attract tourists. I just unfortunately didn't find it detailed enough to meet a lot of the rubric's criteria.
Thank you. And so at this time, we'd like to invite other panelists. And just a point of clarification, Manny, earlier whenever you were talking about key constituencies, just to clarify, you were saying that they were challenging to identify key constituencies that are at risk of erasure.
Yeah, that's what I had in my notes.
Okay, just want to clarify if that's what you were saying. I think the language that you used was the activity was not at risk of erasure. So I just want to uplift what you were identifying as in the key constituencies were not identified, the ones who are at risk of erasure. Okay. And at this point, we'd invite other panelists to contribute anything that hasn't been said already that you would like to share for this applicant. Feedback in any particular area.
Seeing as there are no additional comments from the panel, again, we're asking them not to repeat anything that has already been stated. So if they're not providing comments, they're in agreement with what has been stated previously. Patty, I see you're kind of thinking. Did you have a comment? No, sorry, saw your face. Couple more seconds if panelists are collecting their thoughts, have any other things they'd like to add on this application. Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Manny, Patty, Julia, Jimena, and Carly. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is, I don't know if this is a typo or we just have it entered incorrectly. I don't know if it's Bethlehem or Bethlehem Makonnen. Jimena and Carly are our primary and secondary, and Jimena, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. This applicant is proposing an activity that is a multimedia exhibition, and it has a tentative title, and I invite anyone to tell me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, of Merikit At, and it's an antidote for hopelessness, and it'll be housed at the Museum of Human Achievement, where this applicant has a really strong relationship with this museum. It is a combination of a 2D, 3D, and installation artworks that are going to be community interactive, that are based on generated web-based generator. There's going to be an international video art screening in collaboration with a larger arts festival, and alongside there's going to be a public talk with the featured collaborators. I found this application very inspiring and very intentional when it spoke of its key constituents, which are folks that are of the African diaspora. They have a lot of work and in this particular community, as well in other what they refer to as BIPOC communities. I felt that within the so within the marketing of the event, I would have liked to see a bit more detail on how other members of the community will be encouraged to attend. For example, members whose primary languages are not English and are within the disability community, like mindfully targeting those examples there was a mention of directly contacting new immigrant community of Ethiopian refugees and political asylums that are served within the East Austin community, but not efforts for expanding it to other of the city's priority key constituents like Latin communities, Asian communities, for example. And yeah, I feel like the budget was very representative of the application, and it does request for the full $30,000. And those are all my comments.
Thank you. Before we move on to the secondary, just a note of clarification for my own part. Staff has just done a cursory glance of these applications. Bettelhelm Makonnen is the name of the artist who submitted this. So that is the name of the artist submitting this application. Secondary, Carly?
Yes, I also found this to be a very strong and compelling proposal. I really deeply appreciate the conceptual thinking and thoughtfulness around the proposed exhibition. One thing being, I really enjoyed the connection between the call and response ceremony they mentioned and the use of this interactive community generated blessings generator. And otherwise, I think just expanding a bit on that accessibility component. Otherwise, yeah, overall, I thought it was strong and just echoing my primary statements.
Thank you. And at this point, we'd like to invite other panelists with additional comments. This one has kind of a range of scores. So if anyone would like to provide any additional commentary, the applicant, that would be helpful, or affirming as well.
Any additional comments, any thoughts that you have that have not been covered by other panelists? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Patty, Julia, Manuel, or Manny and Jimena. And Carly. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Avenoir Magazine. Patty and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And Patty, whenever you're ready to begin. Sure. Oh, you're muted, so.
There was sound happening in my background. I was trying to get that to stop before I unmuted.
Okay.
Sorry, that's what was happening.
No, that's fine. The timer won't start until Patty starts speaking, which sounds like she's ready.
Now I'm ready. Sorry about that. Yes, Avenoir Magazine. Let's see. It is led by Frederick Douglass Womack. They are seeking this funding for a proposal that expands last year's mini-series, the A-List, into Avenoir Magazine and podcast. So aiming for both online and quarterly print format. So it's a different bit of art than I'm used to. So I found this very intriguing, and it is very much culturally specific to Austin's Black and Brown community, as they say in here. I thought it was a very strong proposal and very interesting. They say they are committed to ensuring their activities are accessible to folks with disabilities and other barriers, and they included some interesting accessibility possibilities. I wanted to see a little bit more, and I felt like there was some language around that I felt like maybe there was not as much what's the word I'm looking for? There's no mention of trained professionals and their accessibility, but also just not as much care taken and thought into what they're making accessible with this project. They had a very clear and diverse marketing strategy, though it did not include some specific points that we asked for in this grant specifically. But I thought it was all over. I thought it was a pretty fantastic application. And I would like to see that. I think it's interesting.
Thank you. Secondary, Jimena?
Thank you. I want to note that the budget, they are requesting the full $30,000 as well. And so I just want to make that note regarding budget. I find this organization or this application really beautiful in the way that they want to expand their current impact and make it more of a sustainable, larger, ongoing impact. It does mention having a very strong rooted mission and serving the Black and Indigenous communities, and they have a commitment to highlight members of their key constituents and provide visibility of their work. I would have really liked to see how in the past this organization or this practice or their past events or program has been involving the Black and Indigenous communities from the start, and seeing how it has been like a mindful part of the creation of this request. And I'm also curious about the amount of involvement that the organization has had as far as creating opportunities for their key constituents. And just, I believe Patty mentioned this, but mentioning of services provided or individuals that will be providing services for accessibility and language accommodations would have been great, but they did have a pretty detailed overview of what type of accessibility needs or accessibility accommodations they're hoping to provide. And those are all my comments.
Thank you both. If we could hear from other panelists regarding this application. Anything that hasn't already been said.
Well, panelists are thinking if they have any additional commentary they'd like to provide. I know a couple of comments have been made on the accessibility. There is some information in there that, as has been stated, I can also see where, maybe some more specifics or details would be helpful. I will point out that under assistive technology, they do say making use of screen readers and other assistive technology to ensure our website and digital content are accessible to individuals with visual impairments. They list other items as well, with maybe varying levels of specificity, but there was one that was very specific that I found in that response. So just mentioning that as so you consider that as you are scoring this application. Any additional comments from the panels? Anything not previously stated that you would like to add? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Patty, Carly, Jimena, and Manny. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is the House of E Magi. Julia and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
So this applicant is seeking $30,000 to produce the Dress for Success fashion show and Look Good, Feel Good mental health symposium in East Austin. I felt that this proposal was very clear in describing its mission, the key constituencies, and the proposed activities. I appreciated the detailed brief that will be provided to the contributing artists. I felt that that was really well thought out and well put together and will ultimately lead to a successful event. And I also appreciated the inclusion of the audience and creating art and experiences together. I thought it was great to see the recognition and inclusion of sensory accommodations included in their accessibility plan. And the applicant provided very clear examples linked to their mission and key groups when speaking about their history of service and their background. So overall, I felt like this was a very well put together application and very comprehensive. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Patty?
I echo all of that, and I really appreciated also the creativity of the event itself. I think we kind of mentioned it, saying how it's beyond fashion, it was art, and I felt that equity and care for the audience was central part of that proposal for the activities. It seemed very intersectional was also a good focus of the event. And I did likewise really appreciate the thought out response to the accessibility for folks with other disabilities and other accommodations that could be made. I appreciated how well thought out that response was. And overall, I felt that this was a very community focused and creative project that is in line with the city's funding goals for this.
Thank you both. You all thought pretty similarly on this application. So if there's anything additional that folks would like to share that hasn't already been stated. Okay. I'm not seeing any lingering responses.
If there are no additional responses or differing thoughts, any comments you have that have not already been stated? Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Patty, Manny, Carly, and Jimena. Thank you. Next application up for review is Saul Paul's Be the Change Money, Music, and Arts Festival. Julia and Carly are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. So this applicant is seeking $30,000 to produce a festival focused on inviting local community members and schools from low-income and underrepresented groups. The applicant demonstrates a really solid history of engagement with these key groups, or the key groups that they have identified. It was slightly unclear if it was part of their founding mission, but the applicant also detailed really solid accessibility and language accommodations. Although it was unclear that professionally trained providers will be used, based on our conversation earlier around whether or not professionally trained providers would need to be used. I don't know that I think we can infer that they have covered those accommodations there. And I think it was really great to read about the proposed activities. I thought that they were covered well. I just think it would have been also good to see how key groups would be engaged in the development of these activities per the requirements of the application. Other than that, those are my only comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Carly?
I echo what the primary said. I think the only thing I would add is that I found particularly the letter of support from the founder of Brave and the sample work that they attached was definitely very compelling in the proposal narrative. That's it.
Thank you both. Great. Any additional commentary from our panelists regarding this application? Anything that hasn't already been said? Oh, go ahead, Patty, sorry.
Well, I'm gonna pop in and say, I just wanted to point out, I felt like this had a lot of benefit to the community from this project, that it has, not that the arts in themselves are not a benefit to the community, but they had some extra steps in there and things that education towards the community and things like that that I just wanted to point out seemed like a really great thing, a great event.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing any other lingering responses.
There are no additional comments. We are, just researching something real quick. So a little bit more time if anybody does have any comments they would like to add. Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Patty, Manny, Carly, and Jimena. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. I know we're scheduled for a break, but we do have a representative from the next application up for review, and we are ahead of schedule. So let's go ahead and move on to the next application. So the next application up for review is Mama's Kitchen Press. And Manny and Julia are our primary and secondary. And Manny, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right, I'm ready. This applicant is requesting $30,000 grant for Mama's Kitchen Press. It's manuscripts and mocktails. That's the name of the activity. It is a way to create an event that is very unsocial, writing or poetry you do by yourself. They're incorporating it as a social activity and see that the Caseys are in immediate need for facing systemic and economic barriers from a diverse community. The history and the letters of recommendation show that they have a history of service founded in 2021, and the applicant's deeply rooted as a writer, a publisher, and represents the KC as an African-American woman writer, publishes herself 3 times a year, and she develops artists and teaches them how to self-publish, empowers these artists that left to themselves without these social interactions, they may never be elevated. And that's what is the benefit of this grant that I find. And the applicant proposes the live literature event, the workshops. I like the applicant's panelists reflect a wide range of intersectionality. The activities are diverse and they include KCs. Specialized accommodations will be made during and in preparation for the event. Language specialized adaptations will be implemented. And I found the applicant will hire a marketing professional to execute the plan. And proposal meets all requirements to elevate and impact their KCs. Budget was thorough. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia?
Thanks. Yeah, I echo what Manny has talked about. I think that this was generally a really thorough and thoughtful and careful proposal. And I really appreciate the proposed activity. I just think it's really lovely and such a different approach and some unique among the sort of, what everything else focus. It just is great. I just love it. I'm just rambling now, but I think it was it was really cool, and I appreciate what they're trying to do. That's my only comment.
Thank you. And just for a point of clarification, Manny, I think you were saying KCs, and that is for key constituencies, to be clear. Okay. I was following along there. Okay. Any other panelists would like to provide additional commentary, anything that hasn't been said, something that might be helpful to the applicants or to this application?
Yeah, I really appreciated the thoughtfulness of this application as proposed activity and its impact for riders. Having something dedicated for riders sounds like very very meaningful for this applicant. I would have loved to learn more about who the proposed or who the key constituents of this event will be. There is a mention that the proposed facilitators and panelists will be folks from very diverse identities like Black, Latino, LGBTQIA+, elders. But as far as the folks that are being invited, I would have loved to learn more about who would be the key constituents, and who this is particularly targeted to as far as all those audiences. And I think this was a really beautiful proposal.
Thank you. I think we're reading through to see. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Jimena. Carly?
I also really enjoyed this proposal. And I was curious, the applicant mentions navigating life with an autoimmune condition. And also it's mentioned in the proposal, the uptick of COVID, which seems to be somewhat of a catalyst for the event. And I was curious like how that is or could be considered in the planning of the event.
As feedback for the proposal itself.
Correct, yes. Okay. I wasn't sure if because the applicant is or someone is representing that they're able to speak to that or not. Apologies.
Additional comments from the panel? Anything that thoughts or notes that you have that have not been stated by other panelists?
I think I'm the only one who hasn't said anything, and I just want to echo everything everybody else said. So just so I'm not alone.
Perfect. Thank you, Patty. And even if you have already gone, but you know, have another thought that maybe you didn't mention before. But if not, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let us know when you've done so. Manny, Julia, Patty, Carly, and Jimena. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. And we will go ahead and pause the recording.
Recording in progress.
And we are back from break. Our next application up for review is Dana Parodi. Carly and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Carly, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, this applicant is requesting the full amount, and it's for a series of workshops that explore experimental painting and printmaking methods, and it'll be taking place at different rec centers within Austin, and then will accumulate into inspiring a public mural at Maynard Food Mart. I appreciated their utilization of art making as a neurodiverse affirming form of expression, and this kind of celebration of unique abilities meaningful to their key constituents experiences. I also really appreciate the community building aspect through the shared art making processes and the artist's educational background, which mentions specialized teaching methods to address sensory issues, which I thought was really wonderful. Additionally, I think the proposal strongly demonstrates their lived experience within that neurodivergent and differently abled communities, and that the budget was very strong. My comments that contribute to something more medium score would be that intersectional identities are mentioned here and included in the marketing plan. And the demographics and location of the event seem to be in communities that are at immediate risk of displacement. However, I would have liked to have seen more of how the intersectional identities of the communities being served are part of the implementation and planning of those activities, specifically in terms of racial equity. I say this because although it seems like the main focus is on marginalized community of neurodivergent folks and differently abled bodies, it also seems to touch significantly on different Black and Brown communities in Austin. But I think although they have like a history of service working with those differently abled populations who experience many forms of marginalization, and like I said, the area codes they mentioned, with communities that are at immediate risk of displacement or erasure, it was just unclear what the artist's real history of connection was to those communities. And I think one of the main things was that I couldn't find specifically how this project actually addressed those communities that are at risk and how they would collaborate with them and involve those voices as well.
Thank you. Secondary, Manny?
I agree with my primary. There's not much I can add to that, but I agree. Yeah.
Thank you. And there is a statement here under the proposed public activity that states, to involve key constituencies in the development of activities, I will distribute surveys at the rec centers to gain an understanding of participants' interests, concerns, and ideas. This information will shape the content of the workshops. Does that fulfill kind of what you had identified a piece, Carly, about how key constituents will inform the workshops?
I think it definitely shows that there is a lot of thought behind that implementation. However, I would want to hear it expanded a little bit personally. But I would definitely be curious to hear what my colleagues thought as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree how this proposal has a really strong tie within the disability and differently able communities, and the artist or the applicant shows a really deep understanding of the needs and how to collaborate and make the art creation more accessible. Regarding also the way that these communities are going to be integrated, I was curious as well, not only within the workshops, but within the process of creating the public mural. They commented about how the creation of the mural will take inspiration from the different artists and like the way that the workshops are going to take place. But I was curious if the folks creating the art will also be painting the mural. Will they be collaborating in the design of the mural? So that's also a detail that I would have liked to get more information on.
Thank you. Any additional comments that have not already been stated from other panelists?
If there are no further comments from the panel, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Patty, Manny, Carly, and Jimena. Thank you. Let's see. Next application up for review is JKJK Jimena and Carly are our primary and secondary, and Jimena, whenever you're ready to start.
Thank you. Their application is designed to host 7 public events in 2025, including a queer and BIPOC-centered variety show, a new play workshop, and an international performance collaboration. They are aiming to celebrate and elevate LGBTQIA+ and biopic voices within Austin. The organization has been founded from the start in serving these key constituencies, like the LGBTQIA communities, through performances, community events. They have been doing so since the start in 2019. I really appreciated the way that the organization they have outlined how they've met the needs of their key constituencies by providing previous opportunities for individuals to share their story and collaborate within the community and ensure that they are paid fairly, the artists that they are collaborating with. I also want to make points. Sorry, I'm going into my notes again, that within their accessibility, they did include, up to my perspective, a really deep understanding of what type of accessibility needs they're going to be addressing, and they did ensure that an ASL interpreter was going to be available for one performance, as well as and something that I would have liked to see more information about was how more detail regarding the multilingual performance. There's going to be a multilingual performance for German, Bulgarian, and Spanish, but I was unsure if this will only be through translated text or translated during the programs. Just wanted that clarification. And lastly, their budget is requesting the full $3,000 or $30,000 amount. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Carly?
Yes, definitely agree with my primary. Additionally, I thought this was a really strong application for a project that definitely has and continues to demonstrate a really deep impact for these communities. I have firsthand experience of seeing some of their work at Outsider Festival, specifically Catalina O, which I found really moving and beautiful. So I can only imagine how they continue to kind of build their work that it would have that impact.
Thank you. Any additional comments from other panelists about this application proposal? Anything additional? Oh, go ahead. That was-
Oh, for me, I'm just kind of looking through the application just to see if there was anything about the multilingual German. They do say that the performance will be a multilingual performance. And again, staff has only done a cursory glance at these applications. So just looking to see if any additional detail is provided in the budget on that. But they do say in the language accessibility, and maybe that's why they describe it there and not necessarily in the cultural activities section. But they do say Unlived Lives, the reboot will be a multilingual performance, as was mentioned earlier, in German, Bulgarian, and Spanish, with translated text and translated programs, with translations provided by Caddy Q and Ida Daniel. With that being said, additional comments or thoughts on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Manny, Patty, Jimena, and Carly. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is Full Gallop. Patty and Jimena are our primary and secondary. And Patty, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right, got 3 screens. Full Gallop. Whoops, and I'm not even getting to the right one. I do it. Full Gallop. Full Gallop is seeking the full $30,000 funding for a series of programs. Full Gallop is a woman-owned business that was founded in 2015. They say with the mission of bridging cultures and connecting communities through creative collaborations and programs. Full Gallop has been producing, hold on, Zydeco and not producing, but showcasing Zydeco, Conjunto, and different music genres that are at risk of erasure themselves from within the community. So I found this a very strong and fascinating project that they are looking to fund. Let's see, let me go to my other notes now. Let's go to the other screen. I said that their mission is rooted in serving music and art forms that are culturally specific to key constituencies at risk of erasure. And they work to empower those constituencies, though they may not have the lived experience of being from those constituencies. They do seem to be uplifting and focusing their work on those constituents. What else? So I felt they had a pretty strong understanding of the communities, even if they are not specifically themselves from those communities. And what else? What would be a good point? The applicant is using their skills to highlight underrepresented music genres that reflect the city's key constituencies. So overall, I thought it was a pretty strong application.
Thank you. Secondary, Jimena.
Thank you. Yeah, Full Gallop, there, I echo a lot of what Patty said. They are celebrating a 10-year anniversary, and they have had a history of bringing together many diverse and community-focused music events. I can tell like I really appreciated the amount of detail and love that this applicant has for the music, and the way that music does bring a lot of representation. And seeing folks live adds that. I would have really loved to see within, like Patty mentioned, this is a woman-owned business that does not note that they are part of the communities like the Latin community or the African American communities. And I would have really liked to see within their decision-making power, there is a mention of having creative advisors that are within these communities, but I would have liked to see how those voices are integrated within the planning of the event, and how artists themselves are also collaborating within the creation of these events, since it is very targeted towards the Latino and African American music communities. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Additional comments from our other panelists regarding this application? Anything additional might be helpful for this applicant?
If there are no further thoughts, comments that you have that have not been stated by other review panelists. Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Patty, Manny, Julia, Jimena, and Carly. Thank you, everyone. Next application up for review is How heat affects us, film screening and community conversation. Julia and Patty are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah. This applicant is seeking $30,000 to complete production of and publicly screen a documentary focused on education, advocacy, and the development of practical community-based solutions to combat extreme heat and associated inequalities. I really appreciated the unique vision of this application and the work that the applicant is undertaking. It's a unique mission, and the applicant is clearly considering the experiences of their key constituencies that they've identified within their proposed work. And the proposal clearly specifies how these key groups will be involved in the process of forming the end product. And I really appreciated the applicant's approach to sharing these stories and lived experiences of the key groups identified by giving them a direct voice to share their experiences. The applicant demonstrated solid understanding of where their experience meets those who have lived in Austin for longer and experienced greater change, which I thought was a really self-aware something to include that was very self-aware in recognizing their own limitations of their experiences. And so I think within that, I appreciate that they're seeking to amplify the voices of those that do have this greater lived experience. I think their marketing plan is extensive and potentially ambitious. I think it would have been good to see how new audiences could potentially be engaged, but also that can possibly be inferred by the door-to-door outreach activities that they've listed. But otherwise, I thought it was a really well put together application, and I enjoyed reading it. Those are all of my comments.
Thank you. Secondary, Patty?
Okay, sorry, momentarily jumping between screens again. I echo almost everything that Julia said. I thought this was a really interesting project that really is also, I love that it's hyper local to Austin, and it actually is not just working within the community, but actually could bring about positive change, in that they are looking to work with the city, to fix the problems that they are illustrating with their film. So not just the art itself uplifting and raising those voices that the city would like to focus on with this funding, but also there can be actual change and making people's lives better through this project, which I thought was very compelling. I think that's all that I had. I thought it was a very strong, very clear, very understandable application.
Thank you. We invite additional comments from other panelists, maybe some areas that you saw that would be helpful, or affirmations of some of the work that you read as well that hasn't already been stated.
I don't believe it's been stated, but I just wanted to note that I deeply appreciate their collaboration with GAVA. It's definitely an organization that does so much impactful work in like that Dove Springs neighborhood.
Thank you. Manny, I saw you coming off of mute for a second there.
Also, I'd like to add about the event and where it is, being at the Gus Recreation Center on Rumberg. A lot of folks that I've seen that are part of this screening and this documentary are on Rumberg, so it's easy accessible. Just want to comment on that, how great that is.
Thank you. Comments from other panelists? Differing opinions or thoughts or notes that you have that have not been captured by panelist comments already? Seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Julia, Patty, Jimena, Manny. And Carly. All righty, thank you, everyone. Let's see, next application up for review is Yerba Malita. Julia and Manny are our primary and secondary. And Julia, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thanks. This application is seeking the full $30,000 to rent a studio space and produce a live art music show and art exhibition. The activities that were described are compelling, and I think it would have been great to have a little more detail around the activities that will happen specifically in the 3-month lead up until the main event that is described within the application. Presumably it's to create the art installation, but confirmation of that would have been helpful in the actual application itself. It was great to see attention to intersectionality and also to ADA components. Some more thought to other ways to make the project accessible, such as visual, hearing impaired, etc., would have been great to see. The applicant detailed some good marketing plans. I think it would have been good to see how potential audiences with disabilities could have been engaged. But overall, I thought it was a good application. But yeah, I think just stressing that it was a little bit unclear what some of the time would be used to, like what their studio space would be used for in the interim time between the build up to the exhibition. Those are all of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Manny?
Yeah, I agree with my primary and also with accessibility. The services are not provided by a trained professional. That's one thing I just wanted to note there, that there's ramps, but it's not upon request. And in the marketing plan, applicant states that they're open to more suggestions. And what I would suggest is hiring a professional marketer just for the one goal in mind, to reach new audiences in their KC, because that's something that I don't see. But if they're open to suggestions, it would be to outsource a professional marketer or PR person. That's it.
Okay. Any additional comments from our other panelists? This one had kind of a range of scores. If there's anything that hasn't already been said that folks would like to contribute, either for the applicant in the future or just, yeah.
Was kind of looking at the budget as well, and the marketing for the comments that were there. In the marketing, it does say, as was noted, open to more suggestions. They do provide a variety of marketing sources or marketing avenues. So social media, Visit Austin, radio ads, newspapers such as, and they list a number of radio stations, newspapers, such as Austin Chronicle, Houston Chronicle, the Mas Cultura newsletter, and Mexicarte newsletter. So there is some information there, but what the ads would look like, or specifically with the marketing activities, is maybe what the comments were about that. But just drawing your attention that it is there. There's some marketing line item in the budget as well. With that being said, any thoughts that have come to mind of any comments that you have that haven't been stated already, or if you have a differing opinion from what's been stated by panelists already? Seeing as there are none, If you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Carly, Julia, Patty, Jimena. And Manny. All right, thank you, everyone. And we are on to our final application for review today. Imhart, Manny and Julia are our primary and secondary. And Manny, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, Hart is applying for a $30,000 grant, and key constituencies are Asian American community in the arts, also the underrepresentation of this KC makes it an immediate need of the grant. In my opinion, 2 years of history of service has improved the KCs by the key constituencies because MHART is offering opportunities to them, and the leadership amplifies voices of their key constituencies and the artists. The activities will be an album recording and an album release event. They intersect between race, gender, and accessibility is incorporated in specialized services. And the team is multilingual in many different languages. They put thought into this because there's many different languages that need to be available and accessible for this event to happen. So I liked seeing that in the accessibility for languages. Marketing plan is good. Use multiple platforms, and it looks like it will have a great impact on new audiences in key constituencies. The budget is great. I believe it will have an impact as well. And my final comments are that the referrals spoke very highly of Hart. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Secondary, Julia?
Yeah, I echo what Manny has already said. Something that stood out to me in this application was how the applicant also considered their internal organizational culture and made efforts to support their staff as much as they're supporting their key constituencies, or external constituencies rather. And that creation of safe spaces for key groups was a theme that also came through, which I thought was really great to see. But otherwise, those are all my comments.
Thank you. At this time, if any other panelists would like to contribute additional comments on any areas of the scoring categories. Jimena?
Yes, I really appreciated this application and the way that it really centered the art and the artists and supporting the artists to get a larger platform. It shows that they have had great success of helping artists in different parts of the United States, like get recognition. I think they mentioned one of them being in New York. I was curious, I would have liked to know a bit more detail about the specific cultural activity that they're hoping to do. They mentioned one of them is recording and the other one is distributing albums. So I'm assuming that in that case, like part of the funding will go to like assisting the artists and the recording of their music videos, as well as distributing the albums with accompanying video content within the community events. I just would have really liked to know more detail of when these community events will be taking place, what locations they're looking at. But those are all the details I just wish I had more information on.
I just want to jump off of what Jimena was saying. I also found the activity to be so vague that I wasn't sure what the project was specifically. But I'm curious why it sounded like others did see it. I felt like they were talking about previous activities we've done, so therefore we're going to do something like that. But it wasn't specific to what this funding was specifically for as an event in and of itself. So I had a little trouble with that. So that might just be clarity, maybe being clearer about that as well. I thought also this was a activity. Okay, these artists seem to be really good candidates for the city's funding goals, but that was my one hesitation, is that I would like to see a specific, well thought out project to fund. And I did want to flag one other thing. Sorry, in the budget there was, and just flagging this was not anything, but they do say something about how they're also, the individual artists are also getting other city grants. So there was some question of how, and it was in their budget, how do we, can we do this, whatever, with 3 different musicians also individually seeking other city grants. So just throwing that out there, that was in the grant.
Yeah, just
Okay.
I had the same thought when I was reviewing this application, that it didn't seem to be one sort of singular event or project, but rather supporting their general work. But I felt like within the criteria provided by the City of Austin and the rubric, it didn't seem maybe necessary that it was a specific singular event. So I just approached it and scoring it in the same way, but I don't know if that was not correct in doing so.
I guess I was just going to add to what y'all have been saying about the budget. I think the way I saw it with scoring is that they did, in that budget item, reference what they then would be doing as far as like the proposed activities, they'd be able to create albums and focus on marketing of projects and creative development for the team and in-person events. So I just wanted to note that because I know someone had mentioned where folks might have seen that.
We have about 3 minutes left. I am kind of looking through this application for some of the comments that have been mentioned. If other panelists have additional comments, I will say we will make a note about what was said about the other applicants or the other people mentioned in the application looking for other city funding. What I will say is that, if it's for a different project, that's generally okay. And if they do receive funding and the other artists receive funding, we'll be working on the back end with the Live Music Fund, our music and entertainment division, sister division, to make sure that everything is correct before we enter into any granting agreements. As far as the cultural activities, I see how the language is I can see how that comment mentions, and there are no specifics given about, venues and upcoming dates. I'm just looking to see if there's anything in the budget that supports that as well, with just under 2 minutes to left to review this application. They do have $3,000 in venue/office rental. This is based off of our previous event-based rentals. We love getting to create fully immersive events beyond a traditional music venue, so allocating enough to transform a community space into a venue is important. Previous year's proms, our biggest events, at around $2,000 for the space alone. I'm also considering costs to rent out dance studios for show rehearsals, as well as videos like our Made in Austin series that showcase the intersection of Austin's music and dance scenes. So, to our directive of looking beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible, I think it's a good comment that, more specifics and more details would help that, but I think you may be able to infer from what's in the budget there, but ultimately it is your decision on how well the application is meeting the review criteria and giving you the specifics that you need to fully score. We've got 45 seconds left. Any additional comments or thoughts on this application? Seeing as there are none, just with the final 30 seconds or so that we have left, again, the budget does show, like, payments to artists. It does show marketing, payments to admin support. So again, some stuff may be able to be inferred, but again, we do ask the panelists to score based on how the application meets the review criteria. 10 seconds left. Any final thoughts? All right, seeing as there are none, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Julia, Manny, Jimena, Patty, and Carly. All righty, and that concludes our review for today. So we will stop the recording.